Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada and indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 25 April 2025. The title of this update is Thinking Caps On, and it begins by recalling a time when teachers would advise their little ones that it was time to put your thinking caps on. The admonishment was a heads up that a particularly difficult question was about to be raised and we'd better start paying attention. We were in a long line of students who had been so advised over the years, with the first emergence of the term thinking cap showing up in the early 19th century in America. Indeed, the forerunner term considering cap can be seen to be in the English vernacular as early as 1605 in England. Given the serious problems that Canadians in Canada face in the run-up to election 2025, perhaps it would be advisable to dust off our thinking caps and fix them firmly on our heads. Certainly between the economy, the state of our civil liberties, and our failing global status, there is much for Canadians to consider and think upon. Of course, putting on the thinking cap is not a literal event, but is more a metaphorical exercise. It is an exercise that involves a lengthy consideration of a question or a problem that could use both inspiration and guidance to address. Indeed, it might be said that you are about to commence a thought journey to solve what Sherlock Holmes would term to be a three-pipe problem. It goes without saying that the last thing a thinking cap exercise needs are distractions, falsities, and outright censorship of relevant facts and evidence. The process, by definition, will require access to all available information, whether it be seen initially to be applicable or not. Then, and even more importantly, it will require an open and impartial mind dedicated to coming as close to a truthful solution as possible. One can be forgiven for believing that these conditions are not in play with the election 2025 environment. Evidence of distraction, falsities, and censorship of information is strewn across the election 2025 landscape. As noted in these pages some weeks ago, the elbows up psyop was instrumental in distracting attention away from the initial cause of tariffs. Forget about the exploding problem of cartel, triad, and Chinese-based money laundering and fentanyl production activities. All attention would be focused on a politically expedient orange man bad narrative. The proof is in the pudding when one notes that efforts to secure these criminal activities and their impact on our southern neighbor evaporated into nothingness shortly after the acquisition of a few Black Hawk helicopters to secure that same border. Add to this the lie that Canada presents a minuscule fentanyl risk to the security and safety of United States citizens, and the obvious efforts of Canadian legacy media to cover up related transnational crime, and you have an environment where the rank-and-file citizen has a hard time finding his or her thinking cap, let alone donning it. As the days wind down to election 2025, Canadians find themselves fighting these same types of distractions and omissions as they try to choose their new government. It's hard to put the thinking caps on when one's head is filled with notions of it's all Trump's fault and we need a leader who will best him in an MMA-style cage fight. There's not much room here for considered thought, as the issues that really concern Canadians are lost in a sea of invective and acrimony for the evildoers south of the border. It's all very convenient for the political forces that have been making decisions on our behalf since the last election, especially those who have exercised political power. Affordability problems for the rank and file? Blame the orange man bad. One of the lowest GDP per capita growth rates in the OECD? Blame unwarranted tariffs. Free speech has gone the way of the dodo in Canada? Blame the MAGA types whose hateful utterings spill over the border and force our betters to restrict our speech for our own good. Canada had nothing to do with the predicament it finds itself in. Really. As discussed in the C3RF update, Cause and Effect, there is a very real danger in heralding one primary cause as the reason for all problematic effects that Canada now faces. As noted, it distracts from the execution of a disciplined analysis capable of drilling down to the root causes, even as it leaves issues in an unresolved state from which they can re-emerge with a vengeance. Accordingly, the key to avoid being dragged down a path paved with distractions and lies into serfdom is to commit to an impartial process of fact-finding, a process that is capable of sorting the wheat from the chaff. One such methodology is that utilized by the Royal Canadian Air Force in its capital acquisition program. I came to know this program and its project approval process quite well in the 1990s when I was tasked with procuring an initial fitment of air-to-ground precision-guided munitions, or PGMs, for the CF-18, a process that included the acquisition of targeting pods and laser-guided bombs that were eventually deployed for use in the Kosovo air campaign of 1999. In the case of procuring an initial PGM fitment for the CF-18, this complex project began with the identification of related requirements, which themselves were derived from operator-identified deficiencies related to the conduct of assigned missions. These shortcomings were officially captured in Statements of Operational Capability Deficiencies, or SOCDs, that drove a process that, quote, ensures that project requirements are well understood and backed by the appropriate department, unquote. The operational deficiency that motivated the formation of an air-to-ground precision-guided munitions project for the CF-18 was the RCAF's experience with ground attack operations in the First Persian Gulf War. The need for standoff and precision was made clear in that conflict as Canadian pilots, myself included, were forced to overfly heavily defended armored formations to deliver, quote, dumb, unquote, bombs with much reduced accuracies compared to those of PGMs. The deficiencies associated with the CF-18 participation in the First Persian Gulf War were addressed aggressively with the identification of related requirements and the possible solutions capable of meeting these same prerequisites. This analysis of options was likewise conducted aggressively and impartially to ensure that no stone was left unturned. Canada, in its current election cycle, would do well to look at its current deficiencies with clear, unblinkered eyes before moving on to the consideration of realistic and workable solutions. Unfortunately, the cynical political ploy of blaming all Canadian shortcomings on Orange Man Bad and his tariffs may divert blame away from our own national authorities, but it does nothing to advance the country's condition. Indeed, rather than looking south, the deficiency that really needs to be nailed down is just how a country so blessed as Canada, with its resource riches and human capital, came to be so dependent on the whims and actions of outliers. As noted in the case for PGMs for Canadian CF-18s, the deficiency was so obvious that the related Statement of Operational Capability Deficiency could have written itself. In the Canadian political scene, it can easily be said that the one deficiency that stands out as a possible root cause of all the nation's problems is just as evident and takes the form of a democratic deficit. Such deficits are built up over time as society's institutions become less transparent and more removed from public input in the policy-making process. Hard decisions centered on the rights of individuals are farmed out to judicial or bureaucratic mandarins who are inevitably in lockstep with governing agencies that themselves have been captured by unelected forces. Forget about what's best for the Canadian citizen or the national interest. The democratic deficit will make sure that other priorities will advance to the head of the line. The problem with a democratic deficit, however, is much more than just the loss of the public's voice. After all, the loss of this input ultimately leads to an untethered ruling class bent on persecuting those they swore allegiance to. Accordingly, favored groups and causes get preferential treatment, and the rules of the land are twisted to reward friends and punish enemies that would dare challenge what used to be a representative democracy. And so it is we find ourselves in the days leading up to election 2025 as a Métis grandmother, Tamara Leach, and a blue-collar trucker, Chris Barber, face 2-year-plus-a-day sentences in federal prison on mischief charges, all for their participation in legal Freedom Convoy 2022 protests. To add insult to injury, poor Mr. Barber was even forced to face the forfeiture of his livelihood in the form of his rig, Big Red. Meanwhile, Hamas-supporting protesters continue to vandalize and intimidate with calls to, quote, globalize the Intifada, unquote, and, quote, from the river to the sea, unquote. One wonders, with such bald-faced deficiency identified, why aren't our political parties and leaders, save for those associated with the People's Party of Canada and the Christian Heritage Party, moving on to the options analysis and solution phase? In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all of the links to all of the cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.